recipient of getting a lot of knowledge from various people over here in the last few days. So I thought it was my turn to share whatever I can before the curtain is drawn on this. I am aware that during this period, there may have been a situation where some of us may be suffering from what is being labeled as webinar fatigue, or even a term like webinar, death by webinar is being coined. So it was a challenge to share with you what I want to share, which can be of use to you, which you can start using right away. So let me first introduce myself. Well, I am Major General Dheer. I was lucky to be part of a great organization called Indian Army. I was commissioned in Corps of Engineers way back in December 1965. I was fortunate again to have taken part in Indo-Pak War of 1971. So I'm a war veteran. I was subsequently selected for work in quality assurance in defense, which I did over a long period, virtually dirting my nails in every domain of quality management, starting from store acceptance to heading a lab, to writing standards, being as a controller, and defect investigation, product improvement, and what have you, and also Director of Defense Institute of Quality Assurance at Bangalore, so in training as well. In this long journey, I was lucky to be associated with Bureau of Indian Standard. I've been member of their committee MSD2 and MSD2:1, got an opportunity to represent India in ISO meetings at Bucharest and Beijing, so had a hands-on experience of how international standards are drafted and made a humble contribution. I was back home, I got an opportunity to be the convener for an Indian standard called IS 15700, which is about quality in public service delivery. I was also lucky to be associated with the Quality Council of India ever since its inception. So I've been with them working as a trainer, as a consultant, as an assessor, and also drafting accreditation criteria for BMO, for traditional healers, for train the trainer, and some such like that. I've been associated with academia as well. I was the board of studies of Punjab Technical University for their unique program on industrial engineering with the TQM specialization. And I was their principal lead faculty and director in NCR. I was also the visiting faculty at IP University. Well, if you have a work experience of close to 54 years, forgive me for being so lengthy. That's where I will end. Now let me start with, these are my contact details. Anybody can contact me. Let me start with the good news. Good news is that I am talking to people who are all quality conscious, typically referred to as quality professionals, who are enabling their clients to develop, maintain, and improve quality. I guess in that part of your job, you would be initiating various quality improvement initiatives. It could be from 5S to Six Sigma to TPM to TQM or whatever. And that's where the good news ends and comes the bad news. Bad news is not all quality improvement initiatives succeed. In fact, a lot of them fail. It has been my experience. Original enthusiasm peters down soon enough, and it is back to square one. If you are looking for a harder evidence, I have a research finding of Ernst & Young study of 584 companies where they found that majority of quality initiatives fail to achieve significant improvement. So as a professional, it was something very unnerving. So I got down to working on what I have chosen to call why quality initiatives fail and what is the way forward. Here is a disclaimer. This is not conclusive. This is still work in progress, and hopefully I will keep evolving with it, and over a period of time, we may find a universally applicable model. I'm going to share with you a few case studies. My case study one. I live in NCR, Noida. So a few years ago, I called up my electrician. Let's call him Sonu. He didn't pick up the phone. His brother did. I said, where is Sonu? He said, sir, Sonu is no more. I said, I'm so sorry. He was a good electrician. What happened to him? He said, sir, he had gone to fix up a cooler and he got electrocuted. May his soul rest in peace. A typical Indian electrician is dressed something like this. I wonder if you have had an experience of this kind. And when he comes, he will ask for you to give him a tape or a spanner or things like that. Case study 2. I was on a vacation in Chicago with my son when one day he wanted to get fans fitted in his room, in his house. So he called electrician. And on the appointed date, 2 electricians came. Let's call them Tom and Jerry. They started their work in right earnest without wasting any time. They had no tea break, no smoke break, and they got down to it. They finished their work, asked my son to look if he was satisfied. He was satisfied. He paid them the money, and they went home, leaving a satisfied customer behind. A typical electrician would be dressed something like this. If you notice, he has the PPE on, he has the entire toolkit, and he is looking forward to satisfying his customer over and over again. Now, let's analyze the 2 scenarios. By my reckoning, both Tom and Jerry and Sonu had competence. They were good electricians. And how do we define competence? We define as the sum of knowledge, skill, and attitude. They all had it. They knew what electricity is. They had the skill of which wire to fix where and how to do it. They also had an attitude. But what is the difference between the two? Difference is attitude. While Sonu had an attitude of KFP, for those who don't know what is KFP, it is colloquially called Kya Farak Padta, or it doesn't matter, or Chalta Hai, and he didn't realize it makes a difference. He is no longer with us. It's not something great revelation that I'm sharing with you. It has been only demonstrating what is generally believed to be the role of attitude in our workspace. There's no doubt we have enough knowledge and quality tools and techniques available from top to bottom, but we don't have quality at grassroots. Let me share case study 3, again a personal experience. Before I retired, I had a bank account in a public sector bank in Ludhiana. When I decided to settle down in Noida, so I decided to transfer my account to Noida branch. The day I went, they entertained me, and the girl over there asked me to come on a particular day to collect my passbooks. Fair enough. On that day, I reached over there after attending my session in Indraprastha University. So by the time I reached the bank, the collapsible gate was being closed. So I looked at the guard and I asked him, can I just collect my passbook from the lady sitting on the counter? Before he could respond, a gentleman came and he asked me, what's the problem? I shared with him, I said, I'm so sorry, I had to collect my passbook and I guess I'm not on time. So he had the gate open, ushered me in, made me sit down, gave me the passbook and also said, okay, sir, you need to have different checkbooks as well. So please sign here and I'll give you the checkbooks. And fast enough, he got me the checkbooks and then he presents me his business card and says, sir, I'm the branch manager. You can call me 24/7. Now, can you imagine how I felt? What we talk about customer delight, I was experiencing. But not all branch managers of all banks do that same way. And this story is many years old. So question was, while we can celebrate, because we can do it, we have it in us. Question was, what is the difference between this branch manager and other branch managers? Again, I will say attitude. I'll let the attitude rest here for a moment, and I'll come to my last and final case study. We all are familiar with NASA, National Aeronautical Space Administration in the United States. It was started in the 60s by one-line mission statement by President Kennedy to put a man on the moon and get him back safely by the end of the decade. They achieved it. And that was just the beginning. They've had phenomenal successes using the cutting-edge technology, the finest brains, and exploring the space. But there is one date they will like to forget. That is 28th January 1986. On that day, it was the final voyage of Spaceship Challenger. 73 seconds after its liftoff, Challenger exploded in midair, killing all the 7 astronauts in it. And these are the 7 astronauts, may their soul rest in peace. It was to be a historic and a symbolic mission. Why historic? Because it was the first time they had put a civilian and a school teacher on it. Why was it symbolic? Because they were telling the world that space travel is safe. The teacher, Krista McAuliffe, was to conduct a session from the space for a school. President Reagan, who had to give the State of the Union address that day, was looking forward to this news so that he could share with the fellow Americans and the rest of the world. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. For the first time in history, State of the Union address was cancelled, and he instead devoted his entire talk to this mission and the astronauts. Apparently, the entire scientific community worldwide was shaken, and so were everyone in NASA and upwards, right up to the White House. Before we go further, let me share with you the configuration of the space shuttle. There are three major components in this. One is the orbiter. If you can see, this is sitting on top. This is the shuttle, because after it has gone up, it is where the astronauts sit. They have their entire laboratory, the test equipment, and so on, and whatever they have to sustain themselves with. After doing its mission, it comes back and lands like a typical aeroplane. So it was a reusable shuttle, a concept they had developed a few years earlier. The middle one is called external tank. This is the tank having your whole fuel. Typically, it has hydrogen and oxygenizer or some such word they use, along with anything else. This is what takes it up in the space, and many kilometers up in the space, it is discarded. It is not retractable, it drops somewhere in the sea. Third one is the solid rocket booster, SRB. There's one on left, one on the right. It was a new technology they had developed where solid propulsion fuel was used, and its sole job was to give an immediate thrust to the whole system so that it can go quickly into the space. Now, solid rocket boosters, as well as the orbiter, is hinged onto the external tank. After the SRB is retractable and perhaps can be used again, the external tank can't be. Now, how do they operate? Now, each of these components was given to a space center. They have their space center all over the United States. Like, for instance, the liftoff was from Kennedy Space Center from Florida, and the solid rocket booster, which is our point of interest, was handled by what is called Marshall Space Center in Alabama. Now, having seen this, let's see how the mission, a space mission takes place. If you notice, it's a large, complex system. Like any general systems theory, it was applicable to them as well. Every space center was independent and was doing its job beautifully. And but in the larger context, there was a sense of dependence and interdependence. That's what any system is all about. So is every business entity. Now, let's look at who were the key interested parties in this. Starting from the astronauts and NASA headquarters, the key interested parties were White House, Pentagon, and all the space centers and their vendors and their vendors' vendor. Incidentally, all these were made by private industry. For instance, the orbiter was made by a company called Rockwell International. External tank was made by Lockheed, and the SRB was made by Thiokol. Now, they were not only the interested party, the entire scientific community, not only in America, elsewhere were. So were the Senate and Congress, whose various committees were overseeing it. The problem, where was the problem? Problem was when what is called aft field joint in the SRB. Aft means in the rear. Field joint means, if you notice, it is about 150 feet long and more than 12 feet in diameter. It's a huge thing. So Thiokol was manufacturing and sending it to the Marshall Space Center, where they were fabricated. So this aft field joint was made through what is called tang and clevis arrangement. This is the tang and this is clevis. To join them, 177 stainless steel pins were put all around the diameter. But to make sure that the gases don't escape, they had put O-rings. They are called primary O-ring and secondary O-ring. Now, when these are put to protect them, they had put zinc chromate putty, which was not only protecting it, but had another function. When the high pressure gases move inside the solid rocket booster, that air compresses the putty, which further compresses the O-ring, and they result in what is called pressure actuated sealing. Let me demonstrate. This is the O-ring in the groove, and there is a space. When the pressure comes, this gets like this, so nothing can move from it. Now, O-ring was made by Thiokol. It is made out of a material called Viton. Viton had never been tested at so low a temperature, which was to be there in Florida on its fateful day. A young engineer called Roger B. Joyce had his apprehension, and he said, it is not good for launching. So initially they told Marshall to delay the launch. Launch had, as it had been delayed a couple of times. So when it was delayed just before the launch, the head of the Marshall called up the head of the Thiokol, and it is believed he said word to this effect, now when do you want me to launch? You want me to launch in April? He said, sometimes you guys say you can launch, sometimes you say you can't launch. May I request you to kindly have a relook? It is said that Thiokol had a relook. In that relook meeting, the people who were having dissenting views were not invited. So, and they gave a go ahead, and the result is well known. So the Rogers Commission was instituted to find out what went wrong. Rogers was a former Secretary of State, and it had all the great stalwarts as its member, including Nobel laureates, former astronauts, and what have you. They spent a long time examining every bit of evidence and interviewing a whole lot of people. They gave a voluminous report. I'm sharing a part of that for our discussion today. Major findings were, I will read. Although the O-ring failure was immediate cause, a flawed decision-making process was an equal, if not more important factor. The waiving of launch constraints appears to have been at the expense of flight safety. The Commission is troubled by what appears to be a propensity of management at Marshall to contain potential serious problems and to attempt to resolve them internally rather than communicate them forward. It means they were acting like a subsystem, not part of a larger system. This is further mentioned. The tendency is altogether odds with the need for Marshall to function as part of a system, working towards successful flight mission, interfacing, and communicating with other parts. Commission concluded that Thiokol management reversed its position and recommended the launch at the urging of Marshall and contrary to the view of its engineers in order to accommodate a major customer. Now the summary. Was it a quality issue? But of course it was. It was a serious quality failure of O-ring. But it was more. It was a leadership failure too. This is all that I'm saying, but has come from Rogers Commission's report. Flawed decision making, customer focus. We always talk about customer focus. And this case study of customer focus by Thiokol is in fact being discussed in academia as a case of business ethics and ethics in marketing. Because Thiokol did not use its technical competence, but in order to take care of a major customer, they waived the flight constraint. Remember, customer is not always right. Relationship, they were all working in silos and there were no communication with each other. So their engagement was also limited to their own work and not the flight mission per se. Follow-up measures were instituted. Director of Quality Assurance was put over there. More rigorous procedures and systems were created. Far superior technology was used.
Adhiraj.
Hello. A major quality improvement initiative, you would agree with me. But it didn't work at all because nothing was learned. On 1st February 2003, we had a Columbia disaster. You are muted by host. You are unmuted. Okay. Our very own Kalpana Chawla perished in that. The spaceship perished when it entered the space. Without going into technical details of that, I will only quote one part of what has been said in the report. Culture at NASA and arrogance. Now, arrogance is the sure way for disaster. A beautiful book written by Professor Jim Collins, who has studied the great companies who kick dust, gives the first reason for disaster is what he called hubris. which is nothing but extreme arrogance. Culture. We all talk about culture. What is culture? I have a generic definition of culture, which is in Hindi what I call Bhasha, Bhojan, Bhajan, Bangda. The language you speak, the food you eat, the way you pray, and the way you entertain. Let me demonstrate. If you are in Karnataka, last course of your meal is dahi bhat. But if you are from Rajasthan, it would be papad. So what is the common denominator? Common denominator is your shared values and beliefs. I am part of army culture. The core of army culture is, or belief is, or value is discipline. And the core of that is punctuality. So for me, to be punctual, I don't have to think because culture puts you on autopilot. So I have been out of army for over nearly 16 years, but it is part of my habit. In fact, by my work, I reach embarrassingly early, embarrassing not for me, but for my clients. I'm not doing it to get any brownie points. We all have culture at our homes as well. It takes a long time to make a culture, takes very little to break it. So I believe NASA thereafter has attended these two issues as well. Now, what's the message from so many case studies that we have discussed? Quality is not about technology, systems, and procedures. Now, don't get me wrong. They are the ticket to be in business. Without them, you can't do anything. But so does your competitor. So does everyone else. But if you want to get a cutting edge, you need to do something else. And I quote, Tom Peters, the celebrated management guru, said, quality is not a matter of technique. And he wasn't being flippant. He was very serious. Because what is the core for quality? It is about people. And you all are looking for evidence for what I'm saying. Here is the evidence. Mumbai Dabbawalas demonstrated in great measure. Perhaps that's one of the few organizations in the country which is working close to Six Sigma level, and they haven't attended any of our programs. It is the people-centric. We are familiar with 7 quality management principles. They appear in ISO 9000-21-5. Since it's not a requirement document, not many of us pay great attention to it. In fact, in many of the other international standards also, which are guidance document, it is quoted over and over again. It is not without reason. Because principles don't change, situations change. Principles have a relevance no matter whether you're putting a spaceship in the space or you are running an institution or conducting a training, they will remain the same. We all know that, but do you notice something interesting in that? I do notice something interesting in them. Look at these 4 principles out of 7, close to 58%. They have nothing to do with technology, quality, system, procedures. They have everything to do with people. So I call them, they are the constituents of human side of quality. This is the summary which I had shown you a little while ago. Do you notice quality issue occurred because NASA flouted all the 4 principles of quality management: leadership, customer focus, relationship, and engagement. So I may say quality initiatives fail for ignoring or not fully focusing on human side of quality. Now look inside. How many of us conduct training on these 4 areas? We don't, because we are not even trained in that. They are generally considered to be the domain of HR. But can we have quality in isolation? My submission is, it is hard to do so. The success of quality initiative would warrant a paradigm shift. And to demonstrate paradigm shift, I am going to quote a share which is attributed to Mirza Ghalib. It is in Urdu, and I'll say like this. Umr bhar Ghalib yahi bhool karta raha, dhool chehre par thi aur aina saaf karta raha. In English, all that it means is, Ghalib is lamenting that he had a dirty face and he kept on cleaning the looking glass, hoping the face will become clear. It will never. You got to clean your face. So if you are thinking that we will get better quality by having rigorous everything else and ignoring human side of quality, please think again. What about attitude? Yes, I said I'll come back to it again, and it's time for me to address this issue. They say anything that you do repeatedly becomes your habit. So attitudes are habits too. Now, they are a choice that you make. Here's the story of a guy called Jerry, who was the manager in a restaurant in the United States. And he was always happy. When someone asked him, how are you doing? He says, if I were better, I would be twins or words to that effect. So somebody asked him, how are you all the time so positive? He said, every day I get up in the morning, I ask myself, I have two choices, either to be in good mood or to be in bad mood. I choose to be in good mood. When something goes wrong, I have two choices, either to play a victim or learn from it. We'll come back to it a little later. Now, that's why whenever he changed his restaurant, waiters followed him. After some time, he did something which you are not supposed to do in restaurant business. He had the back gate open and the robbers came. They wanted all the money. While he was trying to manipulate the that number lock, his hand slipped and robbers shot him. He was lucky, he was found quickly and sent to hospital, where after 18 hours of surgery, he became fit and joined his work. Somebody asked him later on, how are you doing, Jerry? He says, if I were any better, I would be twins. Want to see my wound? He did not want to see his scars, but I asked him, what went through your mind when this thing happened? And his reply is astounding. He said, when they came, the first thing that came to my mind was, I should have locked the door. So he's learning, he's not playing victim. He said, what happened next? He said, look, when I was lying, I had two choices, either to live or to die. I chose to live. So when they took me to the hospital, paramedics were great. But when the doctors came, I saw on their face written that I am a dead man. So I had to do something. When they asked me, are you allergic to something? I said, yes. Everyone stopped working and looked at me. I said, well, I am allergic to bullets. Please operate me as if I am a living man and not dead. They laughed and they operated on him. And thanks to the doctors, he became nearly all right. But what is the learning? It was his attitude which made him keep alive. And today, all doctors, after a major surgery, ask you to do so. That's the importance of attitude. Look at these three great persons. They all failed. Albert Einstein couldn't get into Zurich College of Engineering. Edison famously had a team which was to light lamp and the bulb, and they had 1,000 or 10,000 experiments they failed. So he said, we haven't failed 10,000 times, but we have learned 10,000 ways how not to light a lamp. Colonel Sanders was a middle-aged man who knew how to cook chicken, nothing great deal. Wherever he went, everyone said, forget it. And now as there is history, because he established what is called KFC. So one message is they never give up. Now here are the people who had problems and yet they produced wonders. Beethoven, great Western classical musician, produced great music, he couldn't hear well. Milton couldn't see and he wrote great poetry about nature. Most phenomenal is Roosevelt, who was President of America in the Second World War, polio afflicted in wheelchair. If you guys have seen a movie called Pearl Harbor, in that there is a scene after the attack, President is having meeting with the generals, etc., and he wants quick action, and everyone is saying it can't be done, it can't be done. In that scene, Roosevelt tries to get up from his wheelchair. Somebody tries to help him. He said, leave me alone. And he tells to everyone, don't tell me I can't. Now, friends, they are not mere stories. They are real stories. Closer home, Rabindranath Tagore never went to a college, but he is the only Nobel laureate in literature, and he established his own university. Amitabh Bachchan, we all know it. All India Radio felt he had a very husky voice, and Bollywood felt he was too lanky, but he's still laughing his way to his bank using both these criteria. Nandan Nilekani, he couldn't go into IIM, and thank God for that, because he became a co-founder for Infosys and a billionaire in dollar terms in his own right. Ravindra Jain, couldn't see, but produced some of the finest music. Sudha Chandran, we know, didn't have fit, but still dancing. Do you know who is Khwaja Singh? 104 years old, maybe he's more now, runs a marathon. And I must talk about this Man Kaur. Let me show you a video if it works.
सरदारनी मान कौर पटियाला पंजाब उम्र 103 वर्ष आपको चंडीगढ़ का चमत्कार के रूप में जाना जाता है आपने एथलेटिक में आश्चर्यजनक रूप से सर्वश्रेष्ठ उपलब्धि हासिल की आपने अपना एथलेटिक करियर 93 साल की उम्र में शुरू किया आप फिट इंडिया अभियान से जुड़ी हुई
we are not able to see the video
रिकॉर्ड्स भी तोड़े हैं
the video is not coming
Acha, I don't know, then I will close it. Is everybody not seeing it, or somebody people are not seeing it?
I think it is not coming.
Okay.
Very good.
You need to share it, leave it, sir.
I'll do that. But you know, what I want to highlight over here is the most important part is while she's 103 years old, but he started post.
Sorry,
Why
sir.
are we-
Sorry, proceed.
I'm unmuted now.
No, yeah, good.
Okay. She started her athletic career at the age of 93. And when we come close to the age of 60, we think we are retiring. Forget it. Now, what has happened? No, I can't move it further. There's something has moved over there. Now, here's another video which you may not be able to see, but I will be talking about it. If you heard of a guy called Itzhak Perlman, he is a polio-afflicted Jew, given music for various Hollywood movies as well. He was invited to give his performance, a classical Western music. He's a violinist. While playing a violin, his one string broke. You can't play a classic music with 3 strings. Nor we know it and you know it. But he did play. He didn't get up to get his crutches. He played the violin with power and passion, and he produced some of the finest musics. In the end, he was asked to say a few words after thundering applause. He said, "My job is to make music with what is left." That's a very profound statement. We all know it went beyond music. We all are in the center stage of our life. We all playing the violin of our life in which a string or two is broken. Message is, are we playing it with passion and power or not? Why? Because there is nothing called a perfect world. There is nothing called a perfect situation, either at work or at home. So we have to make do with what is given to us. And friends, that is the power of attitude. Can we change our attitude? A lot of people talk about attitude, and so do I. So I took on myself to look out whether we can change our attitude or not. Answer is we can. The second answer is it isn't easy. Because if attitude is a habit, you can change your habit. To change habit, everyone knows how hard it is. Anybody who smokes, he knows how hard to give up smoking. Now, if you can change, how will you change? You will change it by self-directed learning process. That means there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Every one of us who wants to change his attitude will have to develop his own mechanism, which fits. Sorry? Is there anything I can do? Hello? Can I
Please
continue?
go ahead. Please go ahead.
Can I continue?
Please continue. Please
Okay.
continue.
Self-directed means you direct the pace, the area that you want to work, and you work on it. It's an iterative process. Talking about self-directed mechanism, I have chosen to make what I call these laws of learning. And if you don't find value in them, feel free to call it Dheer's folly. My first law is law of necessity. You will learn only if there is a great felt need. If you don't feel the need, you aren't learning. You are just there a passenger. Second is the law of readiness. The more you learn, the more you realize how little you know. When you realize that, you go into a learning mode with a sense of humility. You can never learn with arrogance. One lifetime is grossly inadequate to learn even a fraction of what is worth learning. So you are always a learner with humility. Third is what I call the law of unlearning, a bit of a tongue twister. Unless you learn to unlearn what you may have learned earlier, you cannot learn what you need to learn today. You get my point? Let me explain. If you have a glass full of water and you want to put milk in this, you got to throw the water out. There's a story doing the round that an engineer gets married and he has his wife home and he invited his friends over for a drink and he tells his wife to make some snacks. She walks into the kitchen and starts making some pakoras. We all know what pakoda is, but she's taking too long. He's a quality assurance guy. He goes into over there and he wants to do his root cause analysis as to why it's taking so long. He finds his wife is put in a kadahi, which is only 1/3 filled with oil. He tells his wife, honey, why don't you fill up till the top? She says, out. Don't disturb me. The best pakoras are made in the world by my mother, and that's how she makes it. Well, everyone wants peace at home. He came back. But it was bothering him. His friends gone. Next weekend, they went to his mother-in-law's house. and promptly announces his intention of having pagodas. India, our dear country, sons-in-laws are often pampered lot. Mother-in-law walks into kitchen and the same story. He asks her, Mama, why don't you fill up the oil till the top? She is not amused. She says, son, best pakoras are in the world are made by my mother, and that's how she makes it. Now you don't pick up a fight to your mother-in-law. He comes back, but it is still bothering him. So after some time, he tells his wife, let's go and visit Nani. They go and visit Nani's place and promptly announces the intention of having pakoras made by the old lady. Old lady go into the kitchen. Now there is a twist in the tale. She is frying pakoras in a kadai, which is filled with the oil till the top. He says, Nani, are you unhappy with us? Why? He said, I'm told by my wife and my mother-in-law that you make the best pakoras. Nani likes it. But they also told me that your best pakoras are made only when you keep the oil level low. Nani's turn to laugh. She says, son, when your mom-in-law was growing up, I wasn't very well off. I had only one kadai and it had a hole at 1/3 level. To ensure that oil doesn't spill over, I used to keep the oil level low. It has nothing to do with quality of pakoras. Enjoy yourself. Do you notice? It has taken 3 generations to unlearn what should have been unlearned earlier. Friends, it is easy to get a new habit, but it is much harder to get rid of an old habit. It is easier to get brilliant ideas in your organization, but much harder to get out of bad ones. Last law is the crucial one. Unless you learn to act on what you have learned, you haven't learned anything at all. This is law of action. For this, I'll urge you to resign your membership of NATO. No. You are not member of North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Even India is not. And thank God for that. Chances are you could be member of an organization which is referred to as NATO, which stands for no action, talk only. If you're only talking, you are in the business of intellectual entertainment. If you are in the business of improving quality, you are in the business of actually acting. I'm suggesting a learning methodology which is purely indigenous, has nothing to do with West. And there are some Sanskrit words which I'll explain. This could be a takeaway. First is Shravan. I hope you all are listening to me. Listen. Second is Chintan. You need to be thinking about what the message is. And it could arouse some curiosity or question. So you could be doing some adhyan or study if required. Then is Manan. Now this is critical. That is where you will reflect and see, you will do your gap analysis, what you want to change and what you not want to change and how. Make an action plan. That is where your karam, 4th law of learning, comes into play. You got to act on yourself. Rome was not built in a day. Your habit won't change in a day. So you will need abhyas, that is practice. What you practice, you become really good at. It is generally believed it takes 21 days to make a habit. 21 days, where does it come from? It came from the surgeons who found that people who were given artificial limb, they adjusted with it in 21 days. A lot more research has been done on habits. Nothing sacrosanct about 21 days. It will depend upon the individual and the habit you are wanting to change. It can go anything up from 21 to 66 days. Those of you who are interested in study of habit, there are 2 wonderful books doing the round. One is Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg. Second is Atomic Habits by Charles Clear or some such name. Okay, what do you intend doing? It's not for me to suggest, it's your choice. The saying is, doctor, heal thyself. If you want to change the attitude of your client, you need to look inside. So you need to have to figure out what you intend doing, and believe me, success won't come in readily. You will have to make mid-course correction, and in the end it is doable. Now, to conclude, I will just say in this 40-minute session, I have shared with you case studies. Some of the case study of positive, some of the case studies of negative. Some of them my personal experiences. And we identified that quality is really not a matter of technique, though techniques are the starting point of business. What you need is the human side of quality, and that is harder. You can teach a boy binomial theorem, he will learn it, but you can't teach him good manners or communication skills or attitude. This takes a long time. So in this, I shared with you the importance of attitude, only one thing, gave you a lot of case studies of how attitude, irrespective of your age, your failures, your deformities, your liabilities, you can produce wonders. I wish you all the best in your journey for getting excellence and great quality with your client and yourself, and may you be successful where you are, and may you remain healthy. Sorry,
Okay.
I can't hear. If you have any question, you can tell me. I will take on.